and they want to move back and they have an opportunity to move up and participate in the activities of the secret societies, but they have to be invited. So when we look at the thelemic tree, understand it as an evergreen tree, and in their allegory, the cedar of Lebanon. And if that sounds familiar, that's what the Amorites in Amos 2 are compared to, just as they're strong as oak trees, which could be translated as ash or elm as well.
What do you got for dinner?
We're going to have a pork chop and boiled veg and white sauce.
Don't get missed chickens and mash just for lunch.
Okay.
You got the other stuff all right?
Yeah.
Thanks, babe. Let's take it back more. All right, let's go to the
From the pure bloodline perspective, let's say from the Anjou, for example, they would be looking for raising somebody from childhood, being initiated into the secret societies from childhood. They would be an adept before they're a teen. They're not allowed to take an adept title until they're 25 or 30, and that they would be at Mensa level and have all of the.
All right, welcome to Buy Their Fruits. This is episode 58. We got Garry coming on tonight, talking about the Commitee of 300. I am with my co-host, John. How you doing, John?
I'm doing well, Jeremy. Great to be back, and great to have Garry back as well, of course.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I know how this is going to go. Garry, I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but if they don't, you want to just give a little background about yourself, and we'll have you promote your new book.
Hi, Di. Good to see you.
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me back to your show, and so happy to be here to talk to your audience about.
We're still here, Di. We didn't get raptured. What a surprise.
Committee of 300 tonight. So for people who aren't familiar with me, I wrote a book called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind. And I go deep into the secret societies and how it connects into the bloodlines and into the giants and how the whole world works in book 1. So it's a big part of book 1. And then I wrote book 2, and in case we've got a camera out there that we're
wonder how they'll pull that off, Di. I seen our Prime Minister went to the United Nations and sold out Israel.
using. That's book 2, and it's called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, How Understanding Prehistory and Giants Helps to Define End-Time Prophecy. And there's some significant differences between the two books. Book 1 was written from a strong Christian biases, but kind of how the Bible intersects into the world, parallel accounts of prehistory, history, and what's going on today and what they plan for the future. And so it has a lot of testimony in their own words so that Christians can get a good feel for the enemy that we're up against and how they look at prehistory and what they're going to plan to do. And so Christians got a hold of me and said, we really liked it because it just opened our eyes to so many different things. But what we would really like is somebody to take that type of research and apply it to the Bible completely and tell us.
Hey, boss, good to see you, bro.
Sort of imagine that might be in there about prehistory, the angelic order, the fallen angels, the hierarchy of both sides, the giants, the hybrid giants, and anything else that you think is important about prehistory. And then because you talk so much about prophecy as well, how does that connect into end-time prophecy? So this book is as unique as book.
I've put in the 4th hand because we're supposed to be raptured by it.
1, but in a different way. And so it's like Genesis 6 Part 1 on steroids, and it's also
back at you, buddy,
with Dr. Heiser and his work. This is like Heiser on steroids. There is no other book out there that explains things not taught in the church, like prehistory and prophecy and how it relates to the values that were taught in churches. There's no book out there that's like this. And I would encourage people to, if you want to understand the Bible better, if you want to understand things that are talked about in the Old Testament, you want to bring it to life, this is going to do it in a way that you have not imagined before. And there are way more hybrids and there are way more giant nations than what most people think.
Wow, that was probably the best promotional I've ever heard in my life. That's great. Your first book, I read your first book and it was amazing. It's basically an encyclopedia, and so I couldn't imagine. And I know that the second book is basically focused more towards Christians, right?
Yes.
And yeah, so I think that's going to be a great resource for the body of Christ, man. And, I hope God blesses this for you and
Yes.
goes far and wide, man. That's for sure.
Well, thank you. It's doing fairly well out of the gate. I don't really get true updates until the publisher sends it a couple times a year, but it looks like there's been several production runs on it already. So, and it's got, this morning there was 46 ratings on it on Amazon. So 44 of them are 5-star. One is 4-star. They wanted a little bit larger font. Was the 4-star, and then there's a 2-star, and there's no comments. I'm not sure what they didn't like about it, but maybe they just don't.
Nah, that's where I think we are right now. I think we're right on the brink of the tribulation. I think we're right on the brink, and it'll probably start by the end of the year. That's just what I think.
Maybe they're not Christian, or maybe they just don't want.
We all watch the same stuff. You guys have to come to that same sort of conclusion, surely. Or am I seeing it wrong?
Have anything to do with Genesis 6.
Yeah, they're probably a troll, to be honest with you. Probably a
Well, then they should have given me a 1-star then. They should have done it proper.
They couldn't quite because they knew that there was at least, they liked some part of the book, so they couldn't give you 1 star, so they gave you 2.
Yeah, it's a really interesting rating for sure.
So I don't know how you want to do this or where you want to start, but I know that if you just give you the mic, you're going to run with it. So wherever you'd like to start, Garry.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what you've covered with your audience about the Committee of 300, but I think probably the best or the best or both place to start might be is where do they fit in the order of things, so that people might get a better idea of how important this organization is. And so one of the things I didn't do in book 1 was sort of give the hierarchy to the committees. I kind of, but I just sort of present it in a way where I'm not trying to get stuck into a hierarchical model. And, at that time I knew there was the pyramid models and all these other models, and I knew that
When it happens, but it's a way to get in that. That's how you do it. You go through the rapture.
things in book 2 that I didn't cover off on secret societies. So I left that for book 2, and it's called the Thelemic Tree. And if people aren't familiar with that, the word thelem comes out of Greek
I lost my train of thought there.
in the New Testament for God's will. Now in the KJV, it's also translated erroneously a couple of times to deal with sex and orgies, which is part of the understanding of do as thou will in polytheism. And so people are familiar with the Rosicrucians and the Thelemic ideology that comes out of there.
Is that back in the day church protests on the street? I think it is.
That's
Not protests or demonstrations.
kind of based around it. But they have 2 trees. One's a genealogical tree, which is generally understood as an elm tree. Also could you substitute as an ash tree or an oak tree, that they keep their genealogy of their bloodlines, because the secret societies were started by the royals and they still control it at the upper levels. And even at the lower levels on Freemasonry as an entry level, people are invited because they have a genealogy or a blood type that they've traced or they've kept, and they want to bring them back in, and they have an opportunity to move up and participate in the activities of the secret societies, but they have to be invited. So when we look at the Thelemic tree, understand it as an evergreen tree, and in their allegory, the cedar of Lebanon. And if that sounds familiar, that's what the Amorites in Amos 2 are compared to, just as they're strong as oak trees, which could be translated as ash or elm as well.
So that's who occupied Lebanon back in the day. Is that what he said? Sounded like it. Interesting if he did.
Kind of synonymous in what they use the Thelemic genealogical tree for. And of course, those are on Mount Hermon. And so with the giant cedar tree of Mount Hermon, it has this evergreen. So evergreen is the allegory for immortal, just as the genealogical tree.
Diane, I'm actually better today. So I took my blood pressure meds and we took my blood pressure this morning. It's working, so well, I can't. I'll keep that to myself. Yeah.
Typically, the hardwood tree or deciduous tree,
Sorry, just some thoughts I had out loud.
and the leaves would fall off and it comes back to life. And that's sort of allegorical for them for reincarnation. So then it has both sort of beliefs attached to it. And it's the same as the world tree in the occult. And it's important because if you understand the ideology of the polytheists, they believe that their gods live in heaven, but not in the heaven where the God of the Bible lives, in the third heaven, but in the earth, in Hades or Sheol, otherworld, Argatha. They have 1,000 different names for it around the world. And that's their heaven, and it's in another dimension. So these trees go into the earth and receive their genes, bloodlines for the genealogical tree, and then for the evergreen tree, they're the source of the power and the divine right to rule because they're the spirit's offspring.
Thanks, Di. You'll pick up when I get it wrong. Don't worry.
So as you look at this tree, you have a large trunk, and then you have all of these branches. So you have what they call the thalamic trunk branches, and you have all of these
And Di, I'm sharing this with you because you guys are my family.
branches intersecting with those trunk organizations, and that they have a hierarchy within that branch as you go down, and there's a central branch organization that would be at the head of all organizations underneath, and then at that branch where it branches out from the trunk, that's the main organization that would attach itself to the trunk organization that it's responsible for. So you can look at the main order of this thalamic tree as Freemasonry at the bottom, Illuminati above that in the trunk, Rosicrucians above that, and that's the intersection of the purebloods with the sort of lower, lesser bloodlines that have come up through Freemasonry and the Illuminati, and then into the Rosicrucians. But the top half is populated by the bloodline royales above that, and they supply 50% of that order at the senior level. So above that level is the Committee of 300 families, and I'll come back to that. And then you have the Council of 33 families, and then the 13 families of the Western European bloodlines. And that's the general hierarchy of the Western. And there would be a similar kind of hierarchy in other places around the world where you have other bloodlines, and they would be working in partnership at times, but also in that bloodline sort of rival that they have. So this is a organization that is very much centered on the money in the world. So you can imagine groups like all of the banking organizations would intersect into the Committee of 300. You would have the Rothschilds interconnecting into that level. You would have even the Vatican banking through the Montesa order that is in Jesuit control because of that transition at the time of Francis Borgia took the banking to Switzerland, and that would intersect in. So more modern organizations like the IMF would be connected in there. The World Bank would be connected in there. Projects on cryptocurrency connect in there. The Davos community connect in there.
The Club of Rome?
The Club of Rome likely connects into there. Some people might say the Council of 33. I tend to connect them more into the Committee of 300, and there'd be different levels of that.
Yes.
So, for example, you would have like the bloodlines of the Dutch that are typically. I'm sorry, I was confusing that with the Bilderberger, but it would be the same idea in the Bilderberger Society that connects into the Committee of 300. Powerful bloodline of the Dutch royal bloodline of Orange would be at the top of the senior order, and then you would have other lower bloodline new money people coming in to the Bilderberger meeting, like Bill Gates and the Clintons. You name the ones, and you have to be invited to go there, and you get your marching orders there every year to go do your part in the agenda. In return, their offspring typically are going to be able to intermarry into the bloodlines and move up into the hierarchy. In the Club of Rome, for example, you had Pierre Trudeau when I was growing up, and they showed it on CBC television, which was the national news. Showed him going into, I saw it twice as a child going into the Club of Rome, and then that whole sort of
Oh, these bloody ads. What is that, milk or beer or what?
Ever wonder what having NBN feels like?
media attention disappeared. And the Club of Rome was created to speed up the globalization process in the 1960s. And Pierre Trudeau was elected in 1968, and so he was part of it just before he comes to power, surprise, surprise. And then he marries Margaret Sinclair, a bloodline from the Sinclair of the Freemasonry founders and the St. Clair and the Rollo bloodline of the Norse. So there's always that sort of intersection that's going on. And you're also going to have other societies like the Jesuits that tend to link in to, not the Jesuits, the Knights of St. John that will link into the Committee of 300. I think initially the Jesuits would have linked it into the Rosicrucians because they're sponsored by the Rosicrucians before they developed the lower societies. So that was at that time would still have been the Council of 33, and then they added the 300 families, and then they added the Rosicrucians and maintained that name. And because the black nobility
Hey, Shawnee, good to see
the
you.
Jesuits, both before and after, but two different levels, it gets to be interesting where they might sort of intersect. So the original, let's say, Julia or Fabia gens of the black nobility of Italy, who are supplying popes and like the Borgias and others all throughout the history, that would have been part of the Council of 33. But when the Jesuits were taken down in the 1800s and then restarted in about 1870 to 80, they were sponsored at that time by the lower black nobility versus the senior black nobility. And that's a group that moved into Venice.
Trust you to make a name about it. Us.
And Florence and places like that. So banking and merchants like the Medicis who came over from Phoenicia and migrated over there and established. So there's two different genses, that sort of the Romulus and Remus genses that come down through history through the senator families and Augustus and Caesar and others. And then there's this newer, but still an older gens from another set of bloodlines from the Middle East. So it's
Well, Diane, that's the end. Once they take our cash, we're dead set done.
a very, very important group because it controls all the, the World Trade
come on,
Organization
pick
answers
you up.
into there. Anything to do with
Come on.
banking and economics is going to funnel into there because
Oh, come on.
money is everything. Money gives them the power.
Right.
And they have, and because they control the banking, they have all of this off the book money kept in Switzerland. And even the Rothschilds have moved their banking there. And, the banking gets its start with the Knight Templar after their fall, and most of the wealth with the Templars going into Switzerland where the Knights of St. John are, which is another sister organization, and why it would connect in at the Council of 300, let alone its particularly powerful status at the UN as a sitting member and its connections to secret society, not secret societies, but spy agencies and that sort of stuff. So, and so when we look at the organ.
Vas, if you buy your own stuff, like food-wise, you got to make sure you're going to hide it because the hordes on the street who are now starving, if they see a paddock of food getting grown, they'll go and pluck it. So the only way around it is to hide your food.
Organizations that are intersecting into the Committee of 300, we need to look at it that it's controlling the money and that its money is larger than we can imagine. And so people think that Bill Gates is the richest in the world for a while, and then Elon Musk, and then maybe Bezos, and it's going back and forth. That's a drop in the bucket. And the money that is held in literally a fortress country with the mountains, where they have all the major banking centered today. When I was doing research on book one on, what does that money look like, we get numbers in about, I think the year was about 2000 or 2001 when I got that information, and it was consistently coming from a number of sources. Somewhere at that time between 300 and 500 trillion was off the books. So all the wealth that you might see by the royal bloodlines isn't the real money. The real money is hidden. And they can bring that money out anytime they want. So if they wanted to do a global reset, they could take away all the cash of even the people like Elon Musk, and it's a drop in the...
You remember we saw at some speech, I'm not sure where, but it was from King Charles was there, and he was speaking about the future, and he, I lost short.
Pocket, and then they would fund people like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Bezos and all of these oligarchs after the Great Reset, and they would be even more rich and powerful very shortly after, because you'd have reduced competition all around the world. And the humans, the lower level, the middle class and lower, you will do nothing, right? So that's where all of those types of policies on the global scale comes from, is the Committee of 300 Families. So that's sort of an opening.
There was already a country that done bail-ins during the Jab eras. They had them there in the Jab era.
So I'll let you guys in there because I covered a lot of material.
Garry, to your point that you just mentioned earlier, would you say that the hidden wealth, if we're going from like the Great Reset to what I call the control?
Oh, that's what I talked about, Charles. He was at some event giving a speech, and he said he didn't say Messiah, but he said we're going to need trillions of dollars to take care of the climate. And he literally said trillions of dollars. And he said he will need trillions of dollars at his disposal. Well, he's going to get them. That's Charles they were talking about. Does anyone remember that?
Great Reset to the fake Great Awakening. If you have like the system, because there's many different ways that you can interpret like the people that take the mark of the beast. Like, what is Satan going to promise them, right? And the New Agers, especially within the modern realm, whether it's Bailey or
I'm not picking you up all
Barber's
day.
Hubbard, would write about kind of like this, Saint Germain trust in that, when people take the mark, and you'll see that in the Nasara Gassara, the false pushing of that, where if you have like a binder full of your intentions, right? And then, you'll be given these, if you have your Zimbabwe dollars or your Iraqi dinar, somehow you'll have wealth above your like wealth above your dreams that you could think of as long.
Shawnee, I'm never giving my money away. They're going to have to take it.
Because you do what you've written in those binders, right? So, we've been told in conspiracy cultures in Christian, even in Christian conspiracy cultures for years, that when the Antichrist comes in, and I do believe, obviously, for believers who don't take the mark, then we won't be able to buy or sell. We'll probably be separate out of the financial system. I do honestly believe that. But I would argue that for the...
How could they not use the mark and take you out of the system? You'd need the mark to take you out of the system. That would probably be one of the points of it.
People who do take the mark and do buy in, do this, massive wealth where there might be one world currency based off of commodities, which they're later saying, based off of all the wealth in the world, instead of like a fiat currency backed by nothing. Do you think that could play a role in some, like all the wealth that they have, play a role in some sort of mark of the beast financial system in the future, where one of the pros of taking the mark is to be able to have access to wealth?
Yes, but I reckon you get much more wealth if you're part of the crew.
Yes, in different sort of segments. So that wealth is going to be used to, as we talked about, to refund the reset, however that comes about. How many times that might come about, it's going to be used to fund the wars that are going to come about because of it, so that they can still be in power. And there's a lot of rivals around the world. They don't have China on side. They don't have Russia on side. They may not have Trump on side, maybe on some things, but not on most things. And all of those places and others will demand a larger position in this new globalist state that the Western Europeans want to bring on. So there's going to be a lot of sort of fallout from that. So I would.
I've never seen such an amazing cleaning product. It's just like magic. This revolutionary jet hose pressure nozzle is
I would anticipate probably two financial systems as we see developing right now, one in the East, one in the West. The
Interesting, one East, one West.
Nations, but really you're looking at China, Russia, India. And you might want to add in maybe Germany down the road out of need, just like India buys all of their energy from Russia. And there'll be a third player, might be Persia. That could be included with India. So there'd be another player that would go in there. They already have their own banking, their own credit cards, their own cryptocurrency. They're buying and exchanging in non-US dollars already. So they're already creating that rival. So at some point in time, that'll have to merge to get to the major world system called the Babylon system, that they call it, that they say technically is in place today, but it's not the model yet that they want to get to.
Yeah.
And that is the precursor to the Antichrist beast or mark system. And they call that the Leviathan system. And so that's where they want to get to. So at that point in time, when Babylon is in power, it controls all of the world trade. So there's going to be a large religious component that's going to be part of that as well, just by inference, as the woman riding the beast and controlling the 10 kings. And so that's going to come, and that's going to not be distributed equally, the wealth there. What they're going to do is reinstate the four-class system, or the feudal system as it was called in Europe. And in that class system, you have the bloodlines and the nobility elite, which is the larger family that control the first two classes. And so you have the governing class and like the royals, and you have the priest class, and you have the oligarch class, you have the military class, and then you have a couple levels in that sort of hierarchy, and so they're going to populate the top two classes. The middle class is going to drop down to the way it was before, very, very small, and just enough tailors, bakers, blacksmiths on a more modern sort of understanding, who will be small free enterprise, but not,
I agree, Di. We know what's coming. We've been doing this for a couple of years at least now. We know what's coming.
affecting the oligarch system.
And no one's really scared about it.
They want to bring it.
Meaning us, which is a good thing. It's not meant to scare us. It's meant to awaken us.
And they're doing it through the corporations to do that. And the corporations are what I would call as a degradation or a crime against free enterprise. And it's introduced by the real money to achieve what they want to do globally. And so then you're going to have the basically slave or working class that's just working for their daily wage. And so you might see that coming to its fruition with some of the wars and things that are going on, where you're working for a day's wages, as Revelation 6 talks about. And there's more destruction to come after that. By the time the mark of the beast comes in, there is room for that small class again. There really isn't any room for the lower class except for rituals and slave labor. And if you don't take the mark, we're going to kill you and remove you from the face of the earth. So it's a one step up after that, but it comes complete with the complete angelic interdimensional technology that would come along with it. And all the things that they're talking about at Davos is planning for the first level at Babylon that's in place, so the Antichrist can take it over and then just take it to one more level up.
So when they're promising you the great wealth transfer, it's not going to come to Christians, obviously, even though you have a lot of prosperity preachers saying it's going to come to Christians. But you're also getting the health as well, too, with the promises of cures and med technology that's been seeded in science fiction culture, as you well know. Stargate, Star Trek, for decades.
Yeah.
They're setting up people for that beast system.
And, Davos has been active in saying that this chip implant system is going to come about through the delivery system of healthcare. That because it will also connect you into the beast system, it will also connect you into the healthcare system, and it will supply the digital technology, kind of on a base level as to what mRNA might do, but this would be significantly more advanced. That
That's
just
true.
comes through the chip from this angelic technology. They'll demand that because of the pestilence. They'll demand that to have immortality in the physical world. And they want more knowledge and, of the occult and things like that. So that's what this implant will be designed to do. And to do that, they need to have all of those technology lanes, whether it's crypto, quantum computing, AI, everything that's going on to hit a nexus point to come together. And so in January, the Davos crew, and they're working together almost in partnership now with the G20. So there's been a step up in terms of the money and the support that the Davos crew is doing. And so there needs to be further advancement of AI, which was their stumbling block.
Yeah.
Not where it needs to be. And that's why they did the double down on AI.
Do you think that's why they're free sourcing it to people, to have them all use it at once in the hope that the artificial intelligence can gain knowledge that way? Kind of like experimentalism?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wonder if you thought, Gary, that was, the reason why they're open source, it to everyone, to kind of get them to interact with it, to kind of get them on the hook with it.
Yeah, it's like everything. If you were to introduce AI at its peak of its ability, everybody would say that's got to go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to introduce it over time and get people used to it. And there's a process to all of it. It's way slower than they would have anticipated for acceptance. They've been talking about the cashless society since I was very, very young, and maybe even before that. And everybody thought, the credit card system was going to be that, and then the combination of credit cards and the UPC system. And I think all of that's base technology for it, but quite primitive, sort of compared to the mRNA technology that's digital medicine sending messages, is just sort of a precursor and baseline of where they want to move forward with that technology. So it's taken a lot more time, and they've had that whole premise on how they would introduce the cashless society through the credit cards in place for over 25 years. And they just can't get over the hump that people still want some sort of anonymity. And now they've created other issues with all this other technology. Now they have a major security issue.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where crypto has to come in and get to another level. And you saw the reserve banks, which also answer into, as part of the Banking Association and the Rothschilds, into the Committee of 300. They need to have a cryptocurrency that can work in all dimensions and that can't be cracked. And so it needs to be invisible in terms of its security. So it needs more advancement on the Damon algorithms and that interdimensional sort of capability. So it has to be there that they can manipulate the system any way they want, but nobody else can go in and take their wealth. So until that's resolved, we don't get the crypto in a way. But it's interesting that, last fall, the reserve banks around the world stepped in to take over crypto. And Canada was supposed to introduce cryptocurrency this year, and they backed right away from it. Why? They don't have the AI thing solved yet. They don't have the crypto thing solved in multiple dimensions yet.
They got to do it before Q-Day happens, right? I mean, that's when all encryption is pretty much rendered useless at that point, at least they say.
Yeah.
And I guess to your point, one last thing, I know, Jeremy, you want to get in here and say something, is the darling for Bilderberg for the past year or two is Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel's very much in with Founders Fund, building the beast system, brick by brick with Anderson and Horowitz. I mean, he's literally, there's companies he's funding, I forgot the name of the company, but they're literally putting organs on computer chips.
Yeah.
So they can run simulations with them. I mean, it's crazy.
Exactly. Well, and it needs to be done because you have Elon Musk working on the Neuralink.
Yep.
Right. So, and that's got to go both directions. The Neuralink's got to work with other parts in the body on that sort of technology, and it has to create the hive mind that Davos was talking about, that they see in 5 to 10 years that people will be able to communicate through these types of Neuralinks. And they're going to
Not through
recreate that
us.
whole hive ideology that they believe they had once when the bloodlines were pure from the giants, and that they could communicate through telepathy. So they're trying to create a technological hive mind that the giants once had.
So we talked about AI for a little bit, and we talked about just for a brief moment about the Antichrist, and I just had it's kind of an obscure question, I guess, related to the topic. But in your opinion, do you see? I'll preface this way. So we see like the World Economic Forum and the Young Global Leaders Program, and how Trudeau and Bill Gates and many other famous people have come out of the Young Global Leader programs to literally be indoctrinated and basically groomed to be a leader of the world. Do you think, in your opinion, that the Antichrist will come out of a system like that? Like, will be basically groomed to be the world's leader eventually? And my second question, real quick, is do you think that the whole AI problem that they're having right now is because they haven't associated like quantum computing with the entire system yet? Like, I know they're working on quantum computing and they're trying to perfect that. But eventually they're gonna have to integrate it if they're gonna want, if they're gonna have all this data from the world, billions of people. They'll need to do that.
Yeah, and I'll take the second question first and come back to the first question. So you've had quantum computing working with AI in places like CERN for almost 2 decades. And they're still not there yet either. And again, the thought is it's the AI that's the weak link, and it's not where it needs to be to do what they want it to do. So I think that has a ways to go yet. But they're developing this knowledge faster than we can imagine. There used to be a time where they said, our knowledge would double every 100 years, and then 50 years, and then in the 90s it was every 5 years. I'm wondering how fast the knowledge base doubles today with the invention of supercomputers and all the other things that they've added to it. So it probably isn't that far down the road, but they're not there yet. We don't know exactly how long it will take them to get there. All we know is they're very, very frustrated because they're dependent on it. Everything has to be in place for that. For them to do what they want to do. So work for that convergence as stepping it up. And there may be other issues, but I'm not really getting wind of it. Not that I work from the inside, but usually you get things that you can connect if you're watching around. And it just seems to be it's the AI that's not working.
Diane, I think it might be true. I think he might be what that line says. I've got to be careful what I say. I think he might be that. He's showing all the tendencies, and he's a boastful leader, and there's only one boastful leader mentioned in the Bible.
The way that it ought to be used. So in terms of grooming leaders, they do. They groom 2 sets of leaders, lower level leaders, and then the bloodline leaders. So Trudeau groomed as a leader, for example, or Clinton was groomed. That's not an Antichrist type figure from the bloodline perspective. So from the pure bloodline perspective, let's say from the Anjou, for example, they would be looking for raising somebody from childhood, being initiated into the secret societies from childhood. They would be an adept before they're a teen. They're not allowed to take an adept title until they're 25 or 30, and that they would be at Mensa level and have all of the occult knowledge. And in the European bloodlines, whether or not
you ruined the remote again. Gee, you're unlucky, dog.
Or not, they're working together on it. There's 3 different ones from 3 different bloodlines, or 3 within specific bloodlines. They keep 3 ready to go for every generation. So when as they see it, they would want to have an Antichrist come from their royal bloodline. Now there's rivals to that, and they would be preparing rivals as well, and not just in Europe, but around the world from some of the rivals. So could there be a strong man that comes along, or a surprise? Perhaps. Probably not likely, but it could be possible. But you're going to have the support of the...
It's like Abbott and Costello, isn't it, Diane? This dog drives me nuts. He's crypto. even though it's a female dog.
bloodlines and the 10 kings when they come to power, and they're going to hand power over to Antichrist because they are so jealous of Babylon, has grown rich through the Babylon system. With Antichrist, who introduces, as they would call it in the occult, or the great monarch, or the grand monarch, I guess is what they like to call him, that would introduce what they call the Leviathan system. So, yeah, we need to be aware that they're always ready, but there will be challenges. And so Jesus warned us, and it's supported in the epistles of John, that there will be multiple antichrists. And then there's going to be an antichrist that Antichrist has to take credit for defeating. So therefore, there has to be a counterfeit Armageddon. And so there has to be a true rival that's going to deceive the elect, if that were possible, so that he can deceive the world that he is the Messiah, and do that before the
Who calls himself the vicar of Rome, the Pope.
coming of Jesus. So
That's who they're talking about, the Pope.
that's the time frame that they're working on. So it's going to get really confusing with multiple antichrists and rival bloodlines. I know a lot of people are looking at King Charles III. Well, that would be another legitimate bloodline. Probably not Charles, but maybe William, because of age with Charles, and things still need to be a lot of things built. But they're way more than that. I mean, there's the King of Jerusalem title that's held by the Bourbon bloodline in Spain that was inherited through intermarriage over the last couple hundred years, and his father had the title before him, but it comes through the Habsburg-Lorraine dynasty, and then back through the Anjou bloodlines. And even with them having what they say is the legitimate King of Jerusalem title, there are two rivals within the Anjou bloodline that say they have the legitimate right to that King of Jerusalem title. So you have the Savoy out of the Naples Anjou.
Okay, that Tim Horan, was that his name? The one who picks Jesus as the king, as the Antichrist. I wonder what he thinks about this.
Who are the kings of Italy. And then you have the one Habsburg who claims that he has the right, he should be the rightful king of Jerusalem. But what's interesting is that there are two orders of the Golden Fleece. One is controlled
Actually, that's what I meant to say.
by the King Philippe Bourbon of Spain, that Queen Elizabeth sat at the table at within that Royal Masonic organization. So one presumes Charles would be part of that as well. Now, that doesn't mean that the Windsor family wouldn't make their own claim.
Well, that Tim Horan who picks Jesus as King Charles as the Antichrist, he's apparently the king of Jerusalem. It claims he's the king of Jerusalem. I'm not so sure the king of Israel, but it's definitely king of Jerusalem. I'm talking about Charles. And you remember that guy, Tim Horan, who done a big video on it, which made a lot of sense. So I'm still out. I still think it's King Charles.
But there would be more of an alliance against the Lorraine Habsburg order of the Golden Fleece, that they have a rival Royal Masonic order that they're part of. So, at the top where you have these families, they have branch organizations and Royal Masonic orders.
I didn't know they had golden sheep. That's from Jason and the Argonauts.
Orders left, right, and center as well. It's just part of the whole hierarchy.
Yeah, that makes sense too. And but even if, like, as you were saying, there's some rivalry going on there. Even if, say, one of the bloodlines didn't produce the Antichrist that God ordains to be the Antichrist, I'm sure that one of the 10 kings will come out of one of the royal bloodlines, and we know that the Antichrist eventually takes out like 3 of the kings.
Yes,
You know,
and likely replaces them by implication too in other passages. So puts vassal kings in place.
Now, speaking about the leaders, and I know we're going to get back to the TV.
Come here, I'll give you one.
According to the Bible, there's principalities and powers, the nations, right? In your opinion, Yeah, I never really
That's a
thought
lead
about
to
this
smoke,
this
we
way
say,
until
no.
today. But do you think that some of the leaders
I'm
that
sneaking
are
mum a
running,
cigarette, guys. She's not
um,
allowed to smoke.
for example, like if you get to the top of
Heavy.
the Committee of 300 and stuff, on the top of the
Oh,
people
yes.
You
running
better hide
behind the
it. You get
scenes in
me
certain nations,
caught,
do you think
I'll
that they're
get shot.
inhabited by
I
these
know.
principalities, or do you think that just
You've been through it.
in the sense of like
You've been through it.
communication?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So, and I understand there's the, fallen angels, and then there's also the demons, right? That they would be communicating with. I think they communicate mostly with the demons, but as we get closer to the end time, I think there's going to be other angels that they would, fallen angels that they would communicate with, and you could have an avatara effect. That could be going on with these 10 kings as well. Particularly, it will be with Antichrist, as Satan is going to give his power to Antichrist, as he does the false prophet to deceive people. So, do I think at the royal bloodline level that they're communicating often? Absolutely, and they could be bringing in demon spirits that they could control with their rituals, as they would say, or key words that would add some power to them or wisdom. Typically, a avatar effect would be more symbiotic in that it would just add powers to them. And so you get that understanding out of the Eastern religions, particularly, where it's clear where Vishnu, for example, avatared many times into an avatara. Buddha was one of them. That's why you look at one of the allegorical titles for Antichrist coming would be the new Buddha or Lord Maitreya. With that avatar relationship. And that there is a connection, though, to the Council of Gods, and that each of the bloodlines have a connection back to a specific visible patriarch, as in a Nephilim or a Raphaim, and maybe some Scion bloodlines, as most of the dynasties have, to enhance their nobleness, but also back to a specific celestial mafia godfather. And if you look at the fallen angels, but I like the name Celestial Mafia Godfather, tongue in cheek. And so they would receive power through them and receive the divine right to rule through the Council of the Gods, which rules over the 70 nations, as described in Deuteronomy 32, understanding that number comes from Exodus 1:5, and there's 70 patriarchs in the nations. Listed in the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, First Chronicles, and that by inference, Adam had 70 sons as well, even though they're not all listed, that would have been patriarchs for those nations. And it's important to understand that, because as you look at the understanding of the hierarchy of the gods, and the council of the gods, there's rank and order. They have a host just as there's a loyal host of heaven, and the word host is Saba in Hebrew, means an army of angels. So you have a hierarchy there, and when the parent gods were removed and sent to the pit prison, and then the offspring gods were sent to the pit prison after the flood, other ones moved up in order. And so you have a rank and an order that's connected underneath Satan, under the 7 major gods, and then however many are in that council. And some people think there's, as many as 70 gods in the Council of Nations. But you could also look at it from bloodlines that are represented into that council as well. So there may be a couple different levels to it. So, and why I go there is that name the Committee of 300 families. And they take that out of Greek mythology in the hierarchy of Mount Olympus and its assembly of the gods, of the Olympian gods. And that word hierarchy means sacred ruling or sacred assembly of rulers, is where you get that for hierarchy coming out. And I cover that sort of etymology off in book 2 for people to have a better understanding of the Council of the Gods. And so that Committee of 300, in some
I didn't even know there was a Council of the Gods.
their allegories has several different sort of meanings, but the most important meaning is that it symbolizes the 300 angels that are at the top 300 level of gods around the earth. So there's a hierarchy of 300. And those would be understood as the celestial mafia godfathers. Now, I understand we're only told about 200 that first created giants. I don't know how they necessarily arrive at 300, but they take that understanding for the name of the committee out of Greek history and mythology, and it has some interesting sacred numbers to it in terms of the 3 and the 2 zeros. I won't bother people with all of that, but these are the 300 angels that are going to rule the new Eden as part of that council of the gods, as they would like it. And that's why in the New Age occult, they're always talking about taking it back to the state of Eden, but a new Eden versus an old Eden that would be the whole earth. And in Greek, 300 was the number of guards that would surround a king. So as you look at that sort of in the invisible ones versus the visible ones, you would have 300 protecting and surrounding Satan. That's at the top of the council of gods, right? And
That's a lot of underlings, 300.
And so Pythagoras and his mystery schools would take 300 disciples at one time. You have the battle of the 300, whether it's all accurate or not in terms of the numbers and how the battle took place. It was between Greek and Persia, right? That is a very important number to the Greeks. And so it's probably representative of how that hierarchy works through the council of the gods. You can also use, in the book of Enoch, to get to a certain level into the number of nations, you have the chief of tens. So the chief of tens are basically essentially the 7 Satans, or the 7 major gods underneath Satan, and you multiply that by 10 and you get to 70. So they'd be ruling over the 70 nations, but you also have branch countries. So, you look at what...
So I actually got a mouthful of chocolate. I actually read a book on the pantheon of the Greeks, like Zeus and all that, and they went right into depth. I got rid of it when I became Christian. You throw out all your crappy books. That's what I done with that.
England did, how many countries that they spawned. So that needs to be represented in terms of how that hierarchy works and why you have the hierarchy that is established between the angels. They'll work within those individual nations and branch nations with the same kind of hierarchy that applies to the angelic order. Because everything that is applied in their heaven is applied on earth.
Yeah, speaking about the Greeks, just real quick, I wonder if that number 300 that they came up with, because you said that number was important to the Greeks. We know that there's 12 major gods, 12 of the
12 archons, yeah.
Yeah, archons, but there's a countless demigods as well. You know what I mean? So I wonder if altogether,
Didn't you just say that number yourself fast?
if it would equal 300, just out of curiosity, but
Support for whatever life throws your way. Swiss, here life comes.
Whether you turn it, launch it, lure it, send it, catch it, beach it, moor it. Love it. So get insurance that's a bit more U-shaped. Yui, you insured.
Are you shopping for a new kitchen sink? How do you know what's the best option? Hi, it's Ali from BuildNet here. Today,
Well, the demigods are just giants, so there would have been way more giants, but one might presume that there were 300 bloodlines started through the spurious major giants that were the firstborn, right? It would all work back in their inheritance rights as well. And so the firstborn would carry the bloodline. But it gets really complicated when you're trying to take that back. And how does that measure up today? Not that they keep their genealogy, so they know where they all fit within those genealogies. And, you have many different types of genses that are out there, like the LB gens that I cover off in book 1 and in book 2. You have the Julia gens and the Fabia gens of the Black Nobility, one for the warriors and one for the governors that go back to Romulus and Remus. You have the Creta gens, that is the Zeus bloodline. And, so there's preferred bloodline that would be for the more higher up gods. So you have kings that are formed that are called the Gyges kings, or the Gyes in plural, after the flood, and they're called
Yeah, Trump won't betray Israel, Diane. I'm on his side there.
These kings because they're giant kings, tyrants, tyrannos, and that they are part of the Hercules bloodline of kings, which was an upper level of kings because the
Achilles, Paris, Hector from Troy, they're all Nephilim as well, guys. And this is interesting. When Troy fell, they reckon it fell around 1200 BC. When it fell, Paris, the second oldest son, he done a runner and he founded Paris, France. His name's based on that, which I never knew that till recently.
Hercules are the descendant bloodlines, and there's multiple kings that are in
Yeah, there's a lot of bloodlines in it.
Assyria, they're in Greece, they're in Asia Minor, they're in a number of locations
Yeah.
where these dynastic bloodlines are ruling as kings as after the flood. And Hercules is the offspring of Zeus and alchemy, a human female. So that's part of the visible hierarchy that we need to understand, that would be connected to the invisible ones, but it would be in the same.
When Hercules was a baby, he choked two adders. He choked them to death in their cradle. He's in the cradle, and two snakes attacked him, and he killed the snakes. I don't know why I know that, but I do.
Hierarchical organizational structure.
John, you got anything to add?
Not necessarily to what Gary was saying there. No, but I do find it very interesting you talking about the 12 archons as me being a former Gnostic, how that plays a major role in Greek Gnostic theology and, quote unquote Christian Gnostic theology.
Yeah.
As well too. They kind of blended it all together because around that time you had Jewish Gnosticism, you had Greek Gnosticism, you had later Christian Gnosticism. And it kind of, like I said, kind of put it, you'd have different flavors depending on who you were reading at that time. Because, outside of objectivism, subjectivism, you could just kind of like choose your own Avenger or whatever you want to add to your cosmology, in a lot of ways. But okay, so to go back to Commitee 300 question, something you mentioned earlier is, would you say that the Dutch, anybody from Denmark, Sweden, would they play a role kind of like in that power structure as well too, or are you saying it's a primary England power structure?
Well, England might be more off on
You
their
animals
own.
are driving
Not
me mad.
cooperating
That's
like
it.
with the
Don't
Anjou
lie
bloodline.
on
There's a lot of Anjou.
Don't lie there. You're
And
blocking
Plantagenet
the
is a junior
tablet.
offshoot
Don't
of the Anjou.
move,
There's
buddy.
a lot of Anjou blood that went
Move.
into English kings from about 1000 AD as well. But there's also
Don't
the Norse
go
bloodline
shaking your
there, too.
tail. Move.
So generally, you would go back to the source, and the
Let the
current
pusher.
bloodline of England today
Go.
is the
Go
Hanover bloodline
elsewhere.
from Germany.
Yeah.
Right. So again, you have to sort of get in behind who's running these bloodline thrones, and so out of the Norse bloodlines or the Odin bloodlines, you had the Rollo clan that did all of the invasions and took Normandy and intermarried and took the throne with William the Conqueror and supplied de Bruce as the king bloodline for Scotland. To intermarry. And so you would have, that's the St. Clair bloodline that would have their own stake in providing their own dragon messiah as well. So yeah, there would be several ones that would be out there that would have a direct source back to a pantheon of gods and the high god.
Because the reason I would ask is because you mentioned King Charles and kind of like his bloodline, where, I look at Trump's bloodline because Trump has relation both to Denmark, which became
Diane, that link you gave, it said that China will never give up Russia. That's true. They've got to keep their land together. It's the only way they're going to beat America is if they keep their land forces together. Even if it's overseas, they just got to keep them together. The way I heard it, 40% of Russian military, 40% of them are Muslim.
Christian the First, as well as the
Which I
Scottish
don't like.
bloodline through his mother, kind of like the MacLeod bloodline as well too. And you know, I myself believe that it's quite possible that Trump might be, or someone from his lineage might be the Antichrist, because of his blood being separate than any other. Because I know it was kind of like the 6th or 7th generation where, remember, there was like a girl, I think she was either late middle school or early high school, where she mapped most of all the American presidents in relation to each other, to the kind of like British dynasties.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, King George.
Yes, and Trump, unlike them, again, you have the Scottish and you have the Danish bloodline, which would separate him as well too. So that's why I was asking, like, as far as like, and then there's a whole other discussion too. I know you mentioned my friend Aaron Bachman from Underground Publishing. I've done a lot of research and trying to figure out, well, who's the lost tribe of Dan? Who are the Danites, right? They're kind of like some mysticism of whether or not the myth of and I'll let you get your opinion on this. The myth of Hercules could have actually been, you know, Samson from the years that he wandered off, right? And then he eventually came back. You know, there's kind of like a play of maybe the myth of Hercules was based off of, you know.
No, they're two different people. That's ridiculous to suggest they're not.
You know, Samson possibly wandering or not, which I know is a whole other discussion. But you have
Hercules tends to be predating Samson by almost 1,000 years in terms of the historical records.
So you have, but again, you have like the Danish originally been calling Dan's land, Denmark, and stuff like that and everything.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I know it's kind of like
so that's where you get Denmark from. It's obvious now, but I didn't know that.
kind of like a series of like rambling there. But I just wanted to get your opinion on
I think
that.
I get it. So there's always the possibility you'll have a strong man with very low bloodlines rise to power that surprises all of these royal bloodlines. That's a possibility. I wouldn't necessarily put odds on that as being likely, but you could imagine somebody like Putin who would have low-level bloodlines through being, according to his own mythos, being born of the Putyanin bloodline in Kiev through his grandfather, which Putin name comes out of nowhere in about the 1850s. Putyanin was the original bloodline of the Tsars in Kiev, and they were Scythian, Tuatha, Dud, and An. Now, when you're looking at names associated with Dan, I know there's a lot of research by a number of Christian groups that say that that's a possibility that was a migration of Dan, but more likely it's the Tuatha, Dud, and An.
Yep.
That those tribes, because they predate that, and those names predate. So I would be not looking for that sort of relationship with Dan. Somehow Dan, you know, they come out of Bashan, and that they are part of the religious sort of nature. I'd like to do more research on Dan when I get some time to try and get a little bit closer to the passages that references Dan, and understanding they're not part of the 144,000. So that would suggest they're part of the religious context of the opposing side somehow, some way. So I think we have to be aware that the Stuarts have a legitimate claim as well and still have descendancies. And they had at one time the most ignoble bloodline and were asserting themselves as the people that would do that. And so, you know, King James Stuart saw himself as an Antichrist figure that wanted to create, with his unicorn dynasty, this great world empire, and that his bloodlines would be the ones that would rule it. That was where he was sort of coming from on that. And yet that, you know, bloodline was replaced in the English throne by the Hanovers. But that Stuart claim is still out there. And he's the one who really made famous the divine right to rule. So I think we want to be careful on trying to name presidents. Every president that comes along as an Antichrist.
I know people did Obama.
Yeah.
That is true.
They did Bush, and they did them Clinton. They did them all, believe me. And not get too caught up in the bloodlines that we might think would be the likely ones. They're wannabes for sure, and they may be presenting figures that are going to be some of the Antichrist wannabes, but Until that happens, it's kind of like playing on the roulette table. There's so many of them. And then there's bloodlines like the Xi bloodline who would love to put himself into power to control the world. And some people would say, okay, that might be one of the strongmen. I would put him on more the royal bloodline side because he comes from the Western bloodline of the Shah, XIA dynasty of the Shah dragon empires that came down and was overthrown by the virus by the Western Europeans called communism. They took down that rival bloodline just like they took down the Romanov junior offshoot of the Puyanin bloodline to take Russia down and that bloodline down because they thought it was more pure. And so Xi is part of that old dragon empire dynasty.
Yeah.
And they certainly have dynastic and empire ambitions. So they may be looking to upset. But I think when we look at Daniel 8, we're kind of looking within the old Greek empire that included Rome as one part of the four that the Antichrist bloodlines might come out of. And within the Muslim view, they have bloodlines that they would like to present. And they have the Mahdi, and they have a different one for the Shia than the Sunni. So they'll have rival ones. And then you have this Lord Maitreya or Persian bloodlines that are in play. It's going to get very, very confusing. So I don't try and worry as to who it's going to come from.
Yeah.
Because there's just too many things. And the thing I do try and encourage people to do is not be automatically pointing fingers. And when it comes back to Trump, as what you were posing there is
whatever you think, there's a banana to make your body sing.
Decades of stubborn grime vanished in 60 seconds. Neighbors couldn't believe it. This revolutionary jet hose.
He's kind of like Putin and Xi, is that he's not saying he's against the New World Order. He wants a larger role for the U.S. than what Europeans would like to do. Europeans only want the U.S. as their attack dog.
Yeah.
They don't want the U.S. to have real power. And as these 10 groups of nations are forming, the U.S. is likely going to be, heading one of those groups. Now, they may fold in under England somehow, some way. Now that England's broken away from Europe, there may be more of a Commonwealth that actually does form. But I think the U.S. will still have the largest political might there. But there would be, you might want to look for a connection of what, the bloodlines of the English throne and the presidents there, particularly as we get closer to the end times. So, because there'd have to be that working relationship, or England's part of another empire.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. And we don't know as far as America's prominence or lack thereof in the end times as well too, whether how strong we will be. Some people think that we may wane as well too as an empire. We might fall apart, maybe be absorbed into the British Empire, some sort of like reestablishing some sort of monarchy, maybe with Canada, maybe some sort of return to the Commonwealth if there's some sort of destabilization during World War III.
Yeah, if wars start to get stronger, and we'll just sort of speculate and do some scenarios, wars start to get stronger. I mean, the U.S. as they are today are, unless they go bankrupt with all the spending, which is what kind of part of the plan is, to reduce the power of the U.S. But what's more likely is there's probably a split in the U.S. Into 1, 2, maybe several countries, but 2 for sure. And Canada would have a choice to make and probably might go with those kinds of splits as well. So you could have a more decentralized set of powers that might be more looking to say, we want to be part of the tent, and we would go with a British Royale to lead that. And so all of that will take some things to happen, including tighter trade and economic relationships with England to start happening to sort of foreshadow that that's going to be coming about. But catastrophes and wars change everything quickly. So that's the big changer.
Yeah, I mean, we can end up with a fractured, they're trying to push a civil war to happen here in the United States, which, in my opinion, a fractured union would weaken the United States as a whole and set us up for invasion by our enemies if we enter into a World War III type scenario.
Yep.
At least from what I see, Russia's very close to Alaska. It's not much of a difference. You know, and you can end up with maybe a return, like you could have maybe a liberal state, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
Then you could have a Christian nationalist state.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it could be done without a war. I mean,
Sure.
at the end of the day, both sides are coming to a conclusion that there may be a third side in there too that we don't know, right? But they're basically saying we can't live with each other, and it seems to be getting to be more irreconcilable. But if there is the move to totalitarianism, that'll trigger the war. And I do see that we're moving more towards totalitarianism, and that is what would, to me, be the big thing to trigger the war. But who knows? It could be just say groups of states are going to say, we're leaving. You want to have a war? We'll have a war. But we could negotiate this if you want.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look into like Project 2025, that's basically a blueprint for American totalitarianism. Like it's basically about taking the FCC and all these other agencies and putting them all under the direct initiative of the President of the United States.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting because then it incorporates, one-man power essentially. That could be
totally unconstitutional, which could just in itself, as you try and get that to the surface to impose it. So generally that sort of happens after you seize power, and then you can put that into place. But yeah, who knows? They may be able to control all the institutions to bring it about. They're very close to doing that today. But I still think, I mean, my gut feeling is, I mean, it can go either way, but my gut feeling is if it goes through that form of totalitarian, there's going to be a civil war. Whether it's a long one or not, it's very hard to say we're going to persecute half the people of the country, and they're not going to push back on that.
Yeah, and that could be part of their plan. I mean, most likely, right? Because even loyal nationalists in the United States, like they would be totally down for a civil war if it came down to it.
I bet the lefty liberals in America now regret giving away their guns, because now's the time you need it.
So
Yep.
It's another overall Octopus agenda, you know what I mean? But getting back to the Committee of 300, so obviously I'm not going to have you name all 300 families, but who are some prominent people of the modern day era who are associated with the committee?
Yeah, and you're not going to get a lot of the names, right? Like, you have the Dutch family that's obviously part of that, and they work with the Bilderberg organizations. But the main families of Europe are the Anjou and Plantagenet, so I would classify them in as one. Champagne is a major family. Guiser is a major family. Various houses of St. Clair and Sinclair between French and Scottish and English. But again, they could be classified as one, even though they have different sort of branches. The Habsburg family is obviously another one. Bourbon is obviously one that we met. Brienne. You have the Stuarts you have to be aware of. Obviously, the Windsor Hanover bloodline. You also have out of Italy families like of the lower black nobility, like the Medici, but there's also the Orsini, the Colonna, the Messino, Borghese. These are more of the senior bloodline that goes back to the Juliagens that are operating at that level. So those are the larger sort of names, but there could be a few more in there. Like you might include Fontaine, you might include Joinville or Brienne. But again, those would be sort of the main ones that would be getting closer to the top of the thelemic tree. So some of those would be in the top 13, and probably all of those are in the 33 families.
And do you know possibly because I've heard this family's name mentioned a whole bunch, but it seems to me like they used to be prominent, but I don't know how prominent they are now. But what about the Vanderbilts of the United States? Do you know much about them?
Yeah, that's kind of, it's in there, but it's not significant. But it is connected through, bloodline ancestry. So, and then, they did supply, some major influence at one point in time and some presidents. So, yeah, they're there, but they're kind of in the new world. In the New World, they're considered pseudo blue bloods. So they have considerable ennobling to do to enhance them to be recognized by the purebloods, they call themselves.
Yeah, they're a little bit risky than you expect.
Purebloods.
Yeah.
Because I heard at one point they used to be one of the richest families in America, but they kind of faded away.
Yep.
That's interesting. You want to go anything to add, buddy?
With the Habsburgs, Gary, in your research, did a group called Lasserkel ever pop up, which seems to be kind of like the Bilderberg of Europe? Another Bilderberg group of Europe, which is lesser known than the Bilderberg group in and of itself. The Habsburg family seems to have a lot to do with Lasserkel. So I don't know if they popped up in all your research.
Yeah, see what? Yeah, there are, and I remember seeing that name. I can't say that I've dug into them, but I understand that each of the royal bloodlines, they would have their own family Royal Masonic Order, and then there'd be branches of that. So, but to make it simple, you got to get back to kind of the major bloodlines. So lots of those types of of organizations, like the Montesa Order is another royal order. They inherited all of the Templar wealth in Spain that the Bourbon and Borgia, Francis Borgia, he managed it as a Grand Master of the Montesa Order, but it was set up by the Bourbon family to control that organization, and that's part of that hierarchy. And it's the Montesa Order that funded through Borgia the Jesuit order and brought them to power. Through that avenue, got control of the banking. So there's all sorts of those types of royal orders that are out there from each family. Like the order of the Garter in England, and there's the one that everybody's sort of aware of that ex-prime ministers sort of get named to, and they're not really part of the royal order. That's the Royal Blood Order. It would be equivalent at that top level to the Order of the Golden Fleece or the Order of the Seraphim of the Norse bloodline.
Amen.
Yeah, the Pilgrim Society.
Amen,
There's so many
Shawnee.
groups that they splinter off, and we'll never truly know
where and how they fit in. Yeah.
The top organizations, or even the top families. There's probably families that we've never even heard of.
That the other side of it. I mean, if we know of the names, are they really the true powerhouse? But some of the more ancient names, like the Anjou in the West, I mean, that you might be getting a lot closer to the source. So I would sort of try and work it back that way. But again,
I just picked you up literally a minute ago.
Yeah, you probably have, like you said, the banking powers. You probably have the Vatican, the City of London, and then probably Switzerland.
Sitting on the ground. Come on, jump up.
Yeah. Well, the Vatican's banking was moved to Switzerland. So it's controlled by the families.
Thank you.
That's actually an interesting fact, because I was gonna bring up the Vatican. You had mentioned that one of the royal families, the Borgias, what is it?
Borgia?
Borgia, yeah. For the popes. Do you, in your own belief, I don't know your whole eschatology, but for the false prophet, do you think that the false prophet will be coming out of the religious system like the Vatican, or do you think it might come from somewhere else? Are they fighting for that position?
Depends what he's talking about. The Antichrist or the false prophet. Depends who he's calling that. Because all the Catholic popes are actual Satanists. We know that.
As well.
Yeah, they're definitely fighting for that position, and there will be many false prophets. But when we talk about the false prophet, it's going to make the way for Antichrist.
Animals know there's nothing more natural than relaxing and enjoying the healing benefits of water. Spa World has everything we humans need to do the same, from swim spas to spas and saunas to shade. Visit your Spa World shop for our latest sales.
I love how efficient it is. I love how accurate it is. I just love the ease. So definitely 5-star.
Hacking phones at the news of the world has been endemic. Rupert Murdoch explicitly encouraged it.
Our greatest defense against the abuse of power.
See Bluey live at the Australian Reptile Park.
Come and see what the dinosaur.
Hands on.
and Antichrist and false prophet with them, they're going to be the ones that are destroying Babylon. So that whole system gets destroyed when Antichrist comes to power. So could the false prophet come out of Babylon and perhaps the Catholic relationship through the branch of Vaticanus Hill versus the seven hills with the main center at Palatine Hill, I think, produce the false prophet out of that? Probably, but I think we're going to see things more like the vision of the Mary opera.
Shawnee, I'm actually bragging here, but not for the sake of bragging. The layers of deception right there above, yep. Deception and decision, yep. That's it.
And with the initiates that were done in the 90s for 6 children to come out at certain dates with certain prophetic catastrophes to convert, it'll be kind of like that. But that brings about Babylon. So look at that type of support from the angelic realm for.
Okay, look at that. That's Disney. Look at Peter Pan. He's got his doodle out. Look at that. Wow, that's terrible. And what did he show before that? Something similar.
Babylon and perhaps the Catholic relationship through the branch of Vaticanus Hill versus the 7 hills with the main center at Palatine Hill, I think, produce the false prophet out of that? Probably, but I think we're going to see things more like the vision of the Mary apparitions, and with the initiates that were done in the 90s for 6 children to come out at certain dates with certain prophetic catastrophes to convert. It'll be kind of like that. But that brings about Babylon. So look at that type of support from the angelic realm for the false prophet, and with greater prophecies and greater signs and wonders and bringing fire down from the sky. And we'll have to also kind of emulate Elijah. Just as Elijah will make the way for Christ, he needs a John the Baptist and an Elijah type of person as well. That's going to be the false prophet, but it's going to have that sort of pedigree to it too. So then you could make.
Well, John the Baptist is going to be. What was he saying about that?
At Palatine Hill, I think, produce the false prophet out of that? Probably, but I think we're going to see things more like the vision of.
Keep your eyes open for, there's no way to say this, all the penises in this cartoon. Why isn't it going? Okay, why isn't it going?
Well, it's controlled by the families.
That's actually an interesting fact, because I was gonna bring up the Vatican and the Pope, because you had mentioned that one of the royal families, the Borgias, what are they?
Borgia,
yeah, for the popes. Do you, in your own belief, I don't know your whole eschatology, but for the false prophet,
I've actually watched the Borgias on Netflix. I think it was Foxtel, and it's actually a good series, guys. But you also see how wicked and greedy the popes are.
do you think that the false prophet will be coming out of the religious system like the Vatican, or do you think it might come from somewhere else? Are they fighting for that position as well?
Yeah, they're definitely fighting for that position, and there will be many false prophets. But when we talk about the false prophet, it's going to make the way for Antichrist. And Antichrist and false prophet with them, they're going to be the ones that are destroying Babylon. So that whole system gets destroyed when Antichrist comes to power. So could the false prophet come out of Babylon and perhaps the Catholic relationship through the branch of Vaticanus Hill versus the 7 hills with the main center at Palatine Hill, I think. Produce the false prophet out of that? Probably, but I think we're going to see things more like the vision of the Mary apparitions, and with the initiates that were done in the 90s for 6 children to come out at certain dates with certain prophetic catastrophes to convert. It'll be kind of like.
I never knew about the ones in the 90s or 80s, did he say? I never knew about them.
That. But that brings about Babylon. So look at
Christmas.
That type of support from the angelic realm for the false prophet, and with greater prophecies and greater signs and wonders and bringing fire down from the sky. And we'll have to also kind of emulate Elijah.
You get it?
Just as Elijah will make the way for Christ, John the Baptist and Elijah type of person as well, and that's going to be the false prophet. But it's going to have that sort of pedigree to it.
I can go one night without it, babe.
You could make a suggestion that it might be from Judaism or a polytheist version of Christianity as it gets changed into the universal religion and part of it. So it's possible to come out, but we don't get a lot of information on where the false prophet comes from. So, yeah.
Could it be like a technology cult? Someone like Elon Musk, for example, like a transhumanist cult? Could it come out of that if a religion's based around that, Gary?
Oh, sure, absolutely. And when
hey, did you get the minties too? Oh, okay, good. I didn't know.
Polytheism, they're all knowledge cults. They're all knowledge religions. Like Gnosis is knowledge. Yeah. So they're going to bring and harmonize science and technology back into the religion. Yeah. So from that aspect, you create that scenario where it could be more technology sort of driven, right? Or more scientist type driven. But
the original Mickey Mouse cartoon, there was no sound in it at all either. Well, he was spinning a pie with a hole in it, and he was making Swiss cheese, and guess what he was using to make the hole in the cheese? Yeah. So they're pretty bad, Disney.
There has to be such a strong religious nature there as well. For whatever religion Antichrist is going to introduce, it has to have some sort of connection in there from that aspect.
So if like the origins of modern science, if we're going back to the World Society and the mysticism within there, kind of like they used to embrace it, right? And then they kind of separated it, and then they're bringing it back together again. Do you have any idea of why that may be, per se, of why they kind of tried to do their best to completely distance themselves away from it, but now they're kind of being like, well, it was always like this, and this is how it always was.
Well, it's kind of all of that. So in book 1, I talk about how Enoch, son of Cain, receives the knowledge from Cain in the Gnostic and Masonic history that Adam received in Eden, and he takes those sciences and splits them into the 7 sacred sciences that we know as the 7 liberal arts today. And that is going to merge with the technology and angelic knowledge from the fallen angels or the gods as it's understood in other societies. Yeah. And that the mystical religion comes from that.
Sean, haven't they got 666 in their title? Disney? They've got 666 in their title.
Development of that knowledge, and to keep that knowledge that is so powerful, they want to keep it away from the mundane, translation the Sethites, and create their own sort of bloodline sort of control for it that's going to merge with the Nephilim takeover of the kingships when they're created. So this is the beginning, and so they want to bring science back to its home religion, because the mystery schools, is basically where all of our education systems are kind of centered in. And it has all of the polytheism, that is surrounding everything that's taught in there. And that when you had the rise of the Roman Church, they had to make that split away from polytheism because of the pushback from the Roman Church. And so look at Galileo, for example, right? So they had to do something that was different. And so what they did was they created the Royal Society in 1662, and it took a few hundred years to get to the point where they could do this, where they could do
that link's
science,
going,
but not have it equated with polytheism, not have the wrath of the Roman Church on them. So And what that's designed to do, all of the sciences right from the beginning, was to do 4 basic things. One is to lead people away from God. 2 is to just discredit God and slander God. 3rd, and 4 is to honor their pantheon of gods. So they did that in plain sight, but said it was separate from the religions and sort of made it that way. And so they can, but it also freed them to introduce things like doctrines like evolution.
Yep.
Because they don't care. They don't believe in it. They don't.
Erasmus Darwin was a Freemason,
Yeah.
Darwin's uncle,
Yeah.
I mean, there you go.
Yeah, and was an avid fan of Eastern mysticism. So.
Wow, I never knew that.
Well, it's all
about his uncle.
Used to accomplish their goals. So they created theosophy that was designed to be the religion of the end time.
Yeah, agreed.
Sort of seen in Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, and he's the inspirational founder for the Royal Society, and his painting still hangs on that in the lobby there today. And that it was designed to be the harmonization back to its roots of science and religion in the end time, and the New Age morphs out of theosophy and its connection to Ariosophy just before that in World War II, and coincidentally with this alien thing at Rosalind in about 1947.
Yeah.
Or let's get away from the Nazis and let's rename it, rebrand it. And so at some point in time, they're going to throw away all of that nonsense stuff, and they're going to, be coming full center through these false prophets.
Yeah.
That are going to have people convert to this mystical religion or be destroyed from the face of the earth. And I think we see a precursor to that, as in like an early pain, is that the scientists, which will be coming home, have all these prophecies of doom, whether or not it's nuclear war or it's global warming or it's disease or whatever. And I think that's what we're starting to see, that type of apocalyptic nature. But it's going to have to take on that original religious sort of nature as well, and also understand that secret societies take their history.
A lot of the religion in the last 3 weeks have been about this rapture. It didn't happen. I knew it wasn't going to happen. So we were right, guys, because most of you believed it as well, that it weren't going to happen.
Being developed through the mystery schools before the flood.
And guys, I seriously feel sorry for the ones that went and told them, God told them the rapture's there, because they're lying in their bones, and now they have to pay for it.
They have their patriarchs as their major patriarchs as Tubal Cain, Nama, Jubal, and Jabal, sons of Lamech, who is another. This is of the Cain line versus the Sethian line. And their major patriarchs, but Enoch and Cain are their 2 major patriarchs. But Enoch sort of kind of higher because of the knowledge aspect of it, but Cain is more looked like as the original sort of priest or fisher king.
Look, I'm not making this up. This cat is driving. Oh, he's gone now.
This
cat's driving me mad.
2021. I always like the King James translation, the specific.
Okay, Shawnee, God bless.
Knowledge, Paul tells Timothy to guard himself against science so falsely called, right?
Yes.
Which is a more modern translation of knowledge, but what we're dealing with now, it's very fitting.
Yes. It's the wisdom of the world, right?
Yes, very much so. And then you have kind of like, something we discussed last time is something I know you're extremely knowledgeable in, is you kind of like quantum mechanics kind of being, the new form of scientism of how they're kind of, filling in the gaps of things they don't know and just kind of, chalking it up to similar with the Big Bang Theory, and kind of how you have the Jesuit Pierre D. Pierre D. Teilhard Chardin, who was Barbara Marx Hubbard's mentor. Kind of pushing this magical mythos of cosmology, and then you have like this blending of science and mythology that most people are, like you mentioned, evolution. They're just as soon as they're born, they're now taught through the school system directly, and they're almost inundated in it, and they're almost initiated into it. And so Alice Bailey talked about the World Service, how they're going to infiltrate the churches, and how they're going to infiltrate government, and and media, like the Seven Mountains, which originally was a
Oh,
theosophy doctrine.
Yeah.
And then you had, and they were going to, initiate the masses to bring forth the externalization
That
of the
was
hierarchy, right? And you're seeing that where now they're like, well, you know, we told you that science was separate from quote unquote religion and all these mysteries and stuff like that. Oh yeah, we lied about that. Actually, they're together. And science fiction was a way to make people be hook, line, and sinker. I mean, my favorite movie of all time is Back to the Future. You don't get more Gnostic technology more than that. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And that that you can change the times if you want.
Yes.
Just as Antichrist will try and do.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, John, you kind of answered you kind of touched on part of the question that I had.
Oh, you animals, you just
Concerning
want to give me a
theosophy,
break.
I
Come
mean, me
on.
and John and Laura Schrocky kind of dig into this a lot. But theosophy...
Not getting that KFC. No.
NAR, nationalist movement, right? So it's kind of crazy to see how...
What does your future retirement look like? With Telstra Super, you've got the support and guidance to get you there.
Bunnings hates when you do this, but they can't stop you. This new under $90 pressure accelerator harnesses the cleaning force of a hydraulic power system, and its record-breaking success is leaving big names like Bunnings and Amazon trailing behind. In just 30 days, if
theosophy is going to be the end times world religion, how they're sucking Christians into doing that, because, I mean...
What's theosophy? Can someone tell me?
The NAR is basically Christian mysticism, and there's a ton
Theosophy, what's that, vast?
of theosophical, like John mentioned, the seven-mountain mandate. Yep. And that seven-mountain mandate reminds me of the seven spheres or the seven sacred sciences that they're trying to infiltrate. And in the name of Christ, too, which, in my opinion, the way that I see that is, they've said some really crazy things, like they would kill other Christians for not being on board for this dominionist ideology that they have. Yeah. And so what I see is that they're going to become a nuisance. People are going to think that that's Christian. And so the world's going to come against Christians because of the act of these people doing these things in the name of God. You know what I mean? But at the same time, they're casting their theosophical doctrines on everybody as well. And people are searching for that spiritual, mystical type of lifestyle, I guess, and truth. And so I see that the elite are using the NAR movement, the Christian nationalist movement, which kind of go hand in hand, really, as a way to promulgate this end times doctrine, end times religion.
Yeah, it's we have to be very mindful of how much Christianity has been penetrated by polytheist moles who are there to create false doctrines, to get people to say and do things in the name of Christianity, and to...
No, he's still missing Vast. This one's the original cat who disappeared for nearly 3 years, then came back, and I got this cat that's gone missing because the cat next to me went missing, so I replaced him with the other cat. Now, he hasn't been home for 2 days. We put our name down at the vet. We've got markers on him. He's got data chips on him, so we can only wait now.
Predict things and to confuse things, to discredit humanity. And you can see them creating from inside a more of a revolutionary nature as we get closer that the world is going to hate, because they are going to be classified as, apocalyptic, but, more like terrorists, right? So there's part of that's going on, but they're not, I don't think they're just going to rely on that. I think if you want to go right to the heart of Christianity and you want to be able to fold Christianity but not completely destroy it, you have to do something you can fold it into the mystery religion and see so many people within Christianity. So look for them to do two things. They're going to have to discredit Paul. And we see a lot of that out of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and look for more of that type of revelation and information. Yep. And secondly, they're going to have to de-deify Jesus. Because as Paul said, Jesus and his resurrection is the single pillar that our faith is built on. Yes. And so they have to say that Jesus did not was not resurrected, and that he, there's several different ways that they'll be able to do it, but they say they have evidence to be able to do that. So the likelihood is they're going to say Jesus didn't die on the cross and he survived.
And the core tenet of Islam.
Yeah, which is a core tenet of Islam. And that if the world wants to come together, they have to make sure there isn't one Messiah that's already come. That's just so essential to them. And then they need to fold all.
Or one genuine one to come, and the ones in the past have been frauds.
All of monotheism into mysticism. That monotheism they will declare went rogue, and it goes rogue in the time of Moses. Is certainly one of the strategies that my research revealed that they're going to try and do, because you have Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all interconnected at Moses. And what they're going to say, and we see parts of that as well, and there may be even more strategies.
No, he was a different cat. I got that cat to replace this cat because he went missing. I got him back 2.5 years later. Gabe and that saw Gabe. Diane that saw it. So he replaced the cat that went missing. Now the cat who went missing is here. We got a new one missing now. And I'm just going to say, guys, I don't whinge much, but geez, I've had a lousy year. It's still going on now, all the crap. Okay, you're making this bad. Get up there. You're making it bad. Well, get away from the laptop.
But this will be one of the central ones, is that Moses brought back the religion of Heliopolis to Israel, and that only with the monarchy did it go rogue into monotheism. And so,
the one I got now is the one that went missing for 2.5 years.
So if they can make that sort of connection.
And the big mistake, I never put a collar on the other cat. I meant to, but I never did.
And present evidence, false probably, implanted a long time ago because it's a transgenerational plan, then they can sort of hit a lot of people of all three groups and bring them into this Babylon religion.
Yeah.
And then if they discredited Paul at the same time, as he's the heretic, as the Essenes would call him. I'm
okay. I'm just stating facts. It's been a terrible year, but I'm not the type to get depressed. I've done a lot of jail. I know how not to get depressed. I don't get like that.
And that he was the one that raised Jesus to deity status. Now, it's not true. I mean, you see it in the four Gospels, but their argument is that then they'll be well on their way to deceiving a lot. And then you'll have these false prophets that are out there. Convert to the true religion or be destroyed from the face of the earth. So there'll be a lot of unimaginable things that are going.
Catholics certain that they are the worst at defending their faith. And when I say that, I say not in a good way. They follow their faith in a bad way. They actually say you can only get to heaven through the Catholics. I've been arguing with them for weeks on Facebook. They really do say that. Arrogant, yeah. I call them arrogant pricks, because they are. Okay.
On. And then if you have the alien deception or coming along, or all of these entities that are sort of inexplicable and they'll say doesn't fit with biblical theology or biblical accountings, then the people who don't know the Bible well enough, they're going to be deceived.
Yeah, and you're going to have rising ecumenicalism within Christianity as well too. It's kind of as you're trying to move, Christians and into world religion, right? They're going to try to say, oh, it's the differences don't matter. It's all blended all together, because we're all getting together in a one world religion where there is no separation.
Yeah, and you see them working on it in the early stages. I mean, you have basic Christian religions working with the Vatican to do compromised doctrine for one And then you see that same,
As far as we know, they've done the third temple. They've already done it. I told you about it earlier in the stream. They said it was a practice run, but it wasn't.
work going on between the Vatican and Islam to create a common sort of doctrine, which is a compromise on all ends. And you see the Vatican working with Buddhism in the same sort of way. And you see that this will be a compromise doctrine, but there's key things in the compromise that has to be there that changes any monotheist religion into the polytheist religion.
Yes.
Right. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have this little setup in either Dubai or United Arab Emirates where there's the Vatican has a representative building there next to the Islamic representative building and also Judaism representative building. So you can see that whole ecumenical movement like really picking up at this time, which is pretty crazy because what it signals to me is that I feel like the Pope might not be this Pope, but a Pope will be that false prophet to be like, hey, this is the Antichrist. Not the Antichrist. They're gonna say he's gonna say that this is the Christ, and it's gonna if you've already conjoined these other religions, monotheistic religions, like close enough and got them to a certain point, they're all going to accept whoever the Pope is saying it is the Christ. And I say that because, I mean, when it comes down to it, the Pope is literally the most like powerful religious figure right now on earth. So if he says it and can compromise and be like,
yes,
this is the Christ, this is the Christ, people are going to believe it.
Yep. And if you keep Jesuit control over the papacy, you have a polytheist society that interprets everything through the seven sacred sciences controlling it. They're going to continue to change doctrine and move in that sort of direction. And that, but I still think that they're not the one that's going to be the dominant power in the end. I think they're going to be a significant part of it.
I disagree. I think the Catholics are going to run it, and the Muslims are going to be their blood runners.
And that,
I would agree.
And I think that if we look at the 7 hills that Babylon is going to sit on, Vaticanus Hill was outside the 7 hills. It was a branch of Palatine Hill with the Sibylline prophecies, and Palatine Hill was understood in the Roman times as the seat of idolatry and the seat of Satan. So I would look for them to be a significant player, but a branch up.
Geez, weren't the Romans ruthless? Never seen. I love the Roman archaeology and history and all that.
And
like when I don't watch this, I watch military defeats and military conquests on YouTube. I really enjoy it.
And it's interesting that in the old
and I'm training my mind for spiritual warfare.
Etruscan religion, that Vaticanus Hill was a branch of the Sibylline prophecies, time of the Etruscans that predate the Romans, and that we still have that possible play that's coming again in the end time. Now, you can make an argument that there's 7 hills in Constantinople. I don't disagree with that. But what we do know is that the Roman Empire is closely associated with the religion, and the old Roman Empire as coming out of those ashes. So I think there's a relationship there that we need to understand. But when we see not only the Mary apparitions that have been going on all around the world, we're now hearing about apparitions, and they need to get closer to it, of Isis. We see apparitions of other mother goddesses. Hathor is another one. And I don't know how often that's going on in countries we don't get much information out of, but you could be seeing similar kinds of apparitions playing to their polytheist belief system, just as Mary is being used to play to the Christian belief system through the Christian church or the Roman church.
Yes.
Right. Well, yeah. It's so very complex and deep, and it's so fascinating to learn about all this stuff and to dive deep.
I have seen the people in church that speak in tongues. I don't know if it's true, but they do actually. It sounds like some of them speak a language. I don't know how legit it is, like I just said, but it's interesting that that's out there now.
I wanted to ask you concerning your new book. Is there anything in there that you previously didn't know? Like, is there any new information that you were just very surprised to learn about that you incorporated in
Great
your book?
question.
I did most of the research for it through book one. I did more research to go deeper on some things for book two. One of the things that I did add in was the Hyksos and the Amau and the Shamau as they interconnect with Egypt and Israel and the time of the Exodus, and it'll have an interesting effect in book two as well. So I do put out a lot of new information that I didn't have in book one. Some of the things that I talked about, like the Thelemic tree or the Jesuits. I didn't finish the Jesuits. I put them into this, but nothing that. No, I think it was more that if I was going to do a book, I wanted it that it would be mostly like 90% new information and additional information, so it wouldn't be redundant, but more for a handbook for Christians. And that what it really did do is could I put down a kind of chronology in end time prophecy that I like to talk about regularly and actually physically write a larger one. You can't do it all, but I lay down a chronology using how I approach eschatology.
Do it well,
lays
mate.
down the information that I think people need to start understanding how things are going to be shaping up. I'm not a prophet. I'm just putting the prophecy together.
Right, yeah, and you do that very efficiently, in my opinion. Your first book was incredible, so I'm definitely looking forward to your second book.
Yeah.
Is there anything about the Committee of 300 that you would add to cap off some important information about them? Like, I guess their role in well, you already kind of mentioned that. Is there anything that you can think of about the Committee of 300 that people should definitely know about?
Just that where they fit and how influential they are in so many of the economic organizations that they all report back to them, and they're that center that is dealing with that to help bringing about world government. So the G20 organization, their sponsored sort of leaders, they're going to report back in there as well. If you look at most of the imagery that comes out of the Committee of 300, it's Greek, and they are sort of like 300 invisible ones, as they would call themselves. But that's more reflective of the 300 angels. And so they also have kind of a sort of a religious sort of aspect that the cult of Dionysius, depending on how you want to reflect on that, is very, very important as well.
It's Bacchus in Rome, the god of wine.
Was the Sibylline religion and prophecies and that oracle nature, and then they also mix in the cult of Isis as well. So those are three things that I kind of noticed about that they will be introducing those types of. I think they'll be introducing some of those religious type of views more in the economic side as they try and harmonize everything into this ancient universal religion that I like to call Enochian mysticism. So from Enoch, son of Cain. So it's really hard to peel back the onion on that organization. So you really have to have a lot of different sources to get a good feel for who they are and why there's so many of them. But it's the money, and that's the organization that's about the money of the world and how they hoard the wealth and how they don't really want to share it.
So I know that you mentioned the Sibylline prophecies a couple times so far. For anybody who doesn't know, can you give a brief explanation of what the Sibylline prophecies are?
Yeah, it's a Proto-Greek religion and it's Proto-Rome religion. It's the religion of the Indo-Aryans and giants, or giants. You could call them either or. And it's the sort of basis for Zoroastrianism as well, as they started to take that early post-Diluvian religion out. And she's like
she is an actual prophetess.
Queen of Heaven.
They got a Queen of Heaven, have they?
It's the religion of the Indo-Aryans and giants. or giants. You could call them either or. And it's the sort of basis for Zoroastrianism as well.
Can I die?
As they started to take that early post-Diluvian religion out. And she's like a queen of heaven. And there's many queens of heavens in many of the cultures. That's one of them. But it's the prophet side of the Sibyllines that is very, very important. And they moved the statue of the Sibylline that was worshipped in Greece back to Rome in the time of Hannibal. And they had the book of the writings for their country, but to get the full protection, they felt they needed to bring things back to Rome. This is in the time of the Roman Empire, obviously. But its history goes back to the original hills of Vaticanus Hill and Palatine Hill. And that they had these book of prophecies that they needed to study and to follow. That was written down in it. But there was also prophets that come out of that. That were relied on by the early rulers. And so when the Bible tells us about religion and false prophet, just as you have a similar thing that say Elijah fought against with the false prophets of Baal, this is what is coming. And we need to understand that these prophets are going to have the power of the fallen ones behind them. And they're going to be very, very impressive in how they deceive people. So, and that interconnection with the Beast Empire into Palatine Hill and the other 6 hills there is going to be very, 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 very important in my belief system. But it's going to take catastrophes and contrived catastrophes to bring about the change that they're going to need to do to bring that about. But we know Babylon is mentioned as a city 9 times in the book of Revelation. So it's more than just a universal religion. It is a location as a city as well. And it is a beast system. And it is a geopolitical network. So it has all of those other components that will be working together with Babylon as it pulls together. So the Sibylline prophecies I spent a little bit of time on just to sort of make those kind of connections for people to be kind of aware of in book 2. So I do talk about that. But only from how we want to understand Babylon, so we can understand what Babylon means to the polytheists.
Great answer, great answer. John, you got anything to add or ask?
Not specifically on that train of thought, no.
Okay. So is Sibylline prophecies, because I've never dove into them, but does that have anything to do with like the the working, basically to try to bring the world back to the golden age and the return of the gods and all that stuff, or does it have something to do with more of like world order?
Okay, guys, I'm hanging up.
But it's about bringing about that new world order and what comes afterwards. And in the Sibylline prophecies, whether or not they're counterfeit or not, some of the ones that I've read, they actually have an accounting of the destruction of Babylon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like a future destruction of the Babylon?
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
It's very, very similar to the Revelation account.
Yeah, and you had the early church fathers writing about them as well too. And you also have like kind of like pseudo accounts as well too.
Yeah, and so when I decided whether or not I wanted to put it in the book 2 or not,